You're watching the 2022 running back ranking show. That's right, we're talking about 2022.
Deal with it.
Not everything I talk about will be about 2022. I'm going to talk about how I predict a lot of these running backs to finish in 2021, which will help you for 2021 decision making. Those predictions will paint a picture, so don't worry, this video is going to help you for both 2022 and the remainder of 2021. Who are my top 15 running backs going into 2022? We're breaking all that down and more. The Fantasy Football Show
begins now.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Top 5 running backs. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. I'm Smitty. Take a lap. JT Jonathan Taylor. Not only is he the top running back in 2022, he's the 1.1. I don't want to hear any other name. Dude scored 5 TDs in week number 11, 4 on the ground, 1 through the air. He's now the PPR guy. Probably the biggest knock people had on JT was, oh, will he get the volume? Will Hines take all his PPR work? They don't trust him in the PPR game. He's evolving. He's getting better. People don't leave room for improvement for players. And we'll talk about Najee Harris next. People are already trying to define what Najee's going to be going forward or what his limitations are going to be, as if the offense won't change. JT is young. He's 22, turning 23 next year. He has time to become the best PPR running back in fantasy football. Nobody can define what kind of running back he's going to be yet. Nobody gets to say he's not a PPR guy or he's not as good as this player or that player. He could be the number 1 PPR guy in fantasy football. He's had over 172 yards in 2 of his last 3 games, and he has 8 straight games scoring at least 1 rushing touchdown. And he has 8 TDs in the last 3 games. He's having an unbelievable LaDainian Tomlinson type fantasy football season right now. And he started off slow. And what do we say over and over on the Fantasy Football Show? If and when he starts off slow, 1 TD in the first 4 games, not a very good week 1, 2, and 3. What do we say? Trade for him. He would be the best player to go get. Let somebody else draft him high. You come in, trade for him on the cheap, and have a top 1 to 5 running back. Jonathan Taylor, you, my friend, without hesitation, without equivocation, are the 1.01 in 2022. Not just running back 1, the 1.01 in both redraft and Dynasty. Running back 1, 1.1. Number 2 on my 2022 rankings for redraft or Dynasty. Through 2 picks, my Dynasty and redraft running back rankings will be the same. Najee Harris, number 2. If he had a better situation, a better offensive line, which is improving, if he had a more lockdown quarterback situation, you could make a case for him and JT being neck and neck. And they're pretty close, but JT's here, Najee's right here. They're both in tier 1. They're not that far apart, but JT's the clear one. But Harris pulls in so many passes. He's got such an amazing all-around game and skill set, and he's so young, so in Dynasty, he's clearly a top 2 overall player. One note, though, JT's actually a year younger. JT turns 23 in January, Najee turns 24 in March. Not that that matters too much, but I want people to understand that JT's not older when you're trying to rank these 2 running backs, and if age is a big deal to you from a Dynasty ranking perspective. This show right here is not just a redraft show, it's a 2022 ranking show, redraft and Dynasty. I'm going to hit everything. But this man right here deserves the number 2 spot. Number 2 overall and number 2 running back. He's only pulled in 2 receiving TDs, but he's so capable of more. This is like a 4 or 5 receiving touchdown running back if he's got the quarterback support. His quarterback play isn't horrible, but you mix Big Ben's old depleting arm and decision making with the Pittsburgh offensive line. There's a lot to be desired and a lot more on the horizon for him. And it might surprise you, he's only had 2 100-yard rushing games. This week, 105 yards on 26 totes of the rock, and then week 5 against the Broncos, 122 and a touchdown, looking pretty good. But I believe the most understated thing about Harris is that he finds a way to plug a hole. If he doesn't run for 100 yards, he'll do damage in the PPR game. If he doesn't do damage in the PPR game, he does it on the ground. If he doesn't get an overload on either end, combined yardage will be there. So we're all left to wonder and imagine how good he's going to be when he's fed a consistent amount of volume across the board and has a good offensive line and a good quarterback to boot. The dude will look like Jonathan Taylor's looking right now. I firmly believe that. It might surprise you that he's on pace for about 1,200 and something yards rushing, 11 or so touchdowns total, and almost 600 yards receiving. As he matures and develops, much like Jonathan Taylor has, let's give him the same leeway we gave Taylor to get better and better. If he gets better, gets a better offensive line, they figure out the quarterback situation, you might be looking at a 2,200 total yard running back with 14, 15 TDs in 2022. Number 2, without any hesitation, is going to be Najee Harris. That's both redraft and dynasty for both of these guys. And in redraft or dynasty, this is the 1 and 2 overall in a mock draft for 2022. So not just running back 1 and running back 2, number 1 overall and number 2 overall across the board. Every format, PPR, non-PPR, doesn't matter. This is where it gets really interesting because you have a guy in Christian McCaffrey. If he stays healthy, if he continues to ball out like he has been since coming back from injury. So from week 12 on, he stays healthy, does well. Even if touchdowns are vultured by Cam Newton, he still gets total yards, receptions. He's a 140 total yard guy the rest of the way. He's not only going to be the number 3 running back and potentially number 3 overall player in 2022 redraft. He might be in the top 5 for dynasty overall and top 3 running backs for 2022 dynasty, which is crazy because if he does get hurt, if let's say he misses week 15, 16, 17, he will fall completely out of round 1. If he misses a significant amount of time with a season-ending injury, if he suffers some kind of random ankle sprain, misses 1 game, we might not see anything change in 2022. He might be top 3 in redraft, top 5 in dynasty overall. But with a significant season-ending injury, with his workload, it could be possible. I still worry about him. We'll either see McCaffrey up here or down here. So assuming he stays healthy, CMC will be the running back 3 in redraft, probably in dynasty, and probably a top 3 overall pick in redraft. It wouldn't surprise me if in dynasty he doesn't show up at number 3. That wouldn't shock me at all. But it probably would be shocking if in redraft he doesn't show up as the number 3 overall player in this scenario if he continues to keep balling, and if he does what he's been doing right now, even with lack of touchdowns, at least in terms of the touchdowns that he could be getting because Cam's vulturing them. Even if he continues exactly scoring what he is, it would be shocking if he wasn't the number 3 overall pick and number 3 running back in 2022. Dynasty, I wouldn't be shocked if a wide receiver pops up here instead of a running back in dynasty because you're going to have Jamar Chase finishing so strong. You're going to have Justin Jefferson finishing like he's doing right now, dropping loads all over the field. It wouldn't shock me if in a dynasty world, people are like, give me a wide receiver. I'm creating a dynasty team, cultivating it, growing it for a decade on. I don't want a running back. I don't trust running backs, especially when Harris and Taylor are off the board. This guy in dynasty, you can't trust to be there for more than a year, if even that. If you even trust him to stay healthy the rest of the way in 2021. I don't think he's going to show up in dynasty number 3 overall, but a strong finish in 2021 could have him as the 3rd running back, not 3rd overall. So while I'm covering 2022 dynasty, we are focusing more on redraft in terms of the ranking and what I'm going to leave on screen. So McCaffrey for 2022 redraft, we're putting him at number 3, and we've discussed the dynasty thought process going into next year. Who's number 4? Who's number 4 after JT, Najee Harris, and Christian McCaffrey? Now, I have a feeling this is where everybody's all over the map. Some of you are going to want D. Henry. If Henry goes off in the playoffs, if he can get healthy and go off in the NFL playoffs, not the fantasy football playoffs, then there's a conversation that needs to take place as to where we put Henry. For now, I'm not putting him in the top 5. I feel pretty confident putting Kamara and Cook in this area right here. I could make arguments for Swift. You could argue Barkley if you wanted, but we really need to see Barkley finish the year strong before I'm entertaining him anywhere inside my top 5 redraft or dynasty running backs go forward. Don't let nostalgia get a hold of your logic. And no matter how much you love Barkley or Henry, no matter how many shares you have in different leagues spread out across your fantasy football world, don't let nostalgia take over your logic and your fantasy football management. Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, especially Cook if he's backed up. In fact, I probably would swap these two if you can guarantee me that you're getting Madison. But if we just rank these 2 players, Kamara, Cook, I'm going Kamara 4, Cook 5. Cook without Madison has way too much injury risk. I know Kamara is currently banged up right now in 2021 heading into week Number 11, I get it. He's not on the field. How can I talk about injury when Cook's playing and Kamara's not? But bottom line is I'm worried about long-term starting with 2022, looking at it from a redraft perspective, long-term talking about 2022 and beyond. I'm more confident that Kamara can stay healthy for longer than I am Cook. But again, Swift, you could argue Swift here at 4 or 5. And you might eventually be able to get me to agree that it's logical to put Henry or Barkley in the 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 slot, right? But right now, I'm not doing it. And in fact, Austin Ekeler needs to be brought up before Henry and Barkley. For right now, it's logical. Ekeler has a little injury risk, but he's got good situation. I don't care how Herbert looks right now or how inconsistent the Chargers will be. I think the Chargers are going to look a lot better moving forward. Their game is not kicked off yet for week 11 as of this recording. But even if they struggled, I think the Chargers in 2022 and beyond and for the remainder of the year will get going. Austin Ekeler is nestled into a really good situation go forward. My only concern with him is injury. The volume should be fantastic. He's one of the best PPR guys in the game. He makes for a really good 6 to 10 running back right in this range, and I trust him more than Henry. I trust him more than Barkley. The only guys I waiver right here are Ekeler and Swift and Ekeler. One might say Chubb, but I don't trust Chubb as much as I trust Ekeler. They're not that far apart, but I don't know that Chubb has a bunch of years left with his knees. Give me Ekeler here at number 6 and give me DeAndre Swift at number 7. My concerns earlier in the year were valid. Everything was based on 2 things. 1, he is injury prone, but by itself, that's not a concern. That's why I don't mind him right now. His only concern right now is potential injury. But that's baked in, or it was baked in, as I've been promoting to go get him over the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's been baked in. Now you can't get him in redraft 2021 go forward. You probably can't get him in Dynasty because now he's at back-to-back 100-yard rushing games, and now he's getting volume. Now his team is believing in him and giving him starter work and not just giving him a running back by committee situation that's a bunch of garbage, which is what they did in the beginning over and over. We like both Jamal and we like Swift. We will go with the hot hand. 11 carries in week 1, 8 carries in week 2, 8 carries in week 4. Like with Jonathan Taylor, I prefaced I would go get Swift cheap. Later on, I wouldn't draft him high. What's in the past is in the past. Do you want an analyst that's going to say, oh, if I say one thing, I can't waver or let markets dictate where I like a player? I've got news for you. I'm not the show for you. If you think that I'm going to stand my ground on a prediction I made last preseason based on the information then, based on draft value, and continue to hate on a player or throw shade on a player or tell you to avoid a player because I said something in the past, when everything revolves around ADP, everything revolves around ADP or equivalent to ADP trade value during the year. And there was no better buy low running back than DeAndre Swift in 2-for-1 deals where you're giving away one player like a Tyreek Hill for a Swift and a Diggs, a Swift and a Justin Jefferson. You could pull those deals off weeks ago. So take your, oh, you didn't like Swift before, Smitty, you flip-flopper. Flip-flopping is how a good manager adjusts based on market value. It's like a stock market. Do you call an Apple stock investor a hater because he sells on a high and comes back in on a low? You got to be out of your mind if you think what I say about a player is going to stick no matter what happens to the player's value. That's not how fantasy football works, so off with you. Bring Swift in. Okay, Miss Smitty just walked in the studio. You own Alvin Kamara in a league. What do you think about Alvin Kamara? Yeah.
That he should get his shit together.
Because he's not bringing the thunder, is he? He's not doing well for you right now.
Neither is Antonio Brown.
Yeah, well, he's not even playing for you. I'm sorry. Okay, Jonathan Taylor or Najee Harris for 2022?
Jonathan Taylor.
Good answer. He just had 5 touchdowns today. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Bye.
DeAndre Swift, easy number 7 for me for 2022 and beyond. And ironically, everything so far for redraft and Dynasty are the same. I'm not moving around much at all. I would overall, if we're talking about where I rank these guys overall, because JJ, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase might go above all these running backs from 4 down. I'm just telling you, that's how much I love the wide receiver position in Dynasty in 2022 and beyond. And redraft. I might have Jamar Chase and JJ. We'll get into that later. But for running back purposes, it looks like the same ranking to me, redraft or Dynasty so far. Kind of astonishing. Right here, I'm going to put Derrick Henry. And I know everyone's going to get upset that he's this low. But until we see him back to form in the NFL playoffs, I do not think the Titans will bring him back for the tail end of the fantasy football playoffs. They'd be out of their mind to do so. Are they capable of doing something really dumb and ridiculous? Yeah, they ran Derrick Henry practically 30 times a game for an entire half a season, which broke his foot. Coming off of a 2,000 yard and 400 plus carry season, it was bound to happen. So for 2022 redraft, Dynasty and redraft will differ right here. Number 8 overall, Derrick Henry is going to be where the divide is between redraft and Dynasty. Dynasty, he wouldn't even be in my top 10 at all. Redraft, I put him here because if he comes back and looks good in the NFL playoffs, he's going to warrant consideration, probably anywhere between 4 and this range. Could he be number 4? Absolutely. But until he proves that he's healthy, I'm not putting him number 4. I'm not going to advise people to trade for him, to make dynasty trades right now. And some of you can trade all year long around Derrick Henry higher than this value right here. Above Swift, Ekeler, Cook, Kamara, I can't. Not until we see him back to form. I already predicted him to decline by double-digit weeks through an injury or whatever, which currently is the case. If he comes back on a tear in the playoffs, I'll be open-minded to moving him up. I just need to see it. And I need to see it for a string of games. If he comes back in the playoffs and does very little, and he looks like, okay, he's back, but he's not fully ready, we're not going to know what to think walking into 2022. I think a lot of people envision Derrick Henry coming back from the Jones fracture right here where there's little blood flow, rubs up against this other toe, very hard to heal. People just expect him to come back early in the fantasy playoffs, not the NFL playoffs. People envision him coming back early. They want it to happen. Derrick Henry owners are willing it to happen. But the Titans would be beyond stupid to rush a near 260-pound running back on a Jones fracture that needs more time to heal with the kind of weight that Derrick Henry has putting on that toe. And everybody, I think, envisions him coming back totally the same Derrick Henry of old, right out of the gate in the NFL playoffs, and he looks like, okay, and people are going to say, yeah, I got the validation I need. Here is that top 1 to 2 overall running back that we saw all year long. He might look rusty. He might not be in game shape. The Titans could lose their first playoff game. We may not know anything coming out of the playoffs, whether he'll be ready for 2022 to the degree people are going to expect. Put Barkley at number 9. Put Nick Chubb at number 10, although I do worry about his knees. These 3 right here are very shaky, very questionable, very volatile. Put them in a blender. These 2 guys specifically will be very volatile on my rankings based on how they perform in the playoffs and how he does the rest of the way. If Barkley suffers some kind of setback or has another injury that keeps him out 3 games, I'm not ranking him in my top 10 next year for running backs, let alone top 10 overall, let alone dynasty top 10 overall, let alone dynasty top 10 running backs. Same can be said for Henry. That's why I'm not really entertained by the running backs in this 8 to 10 range in 2022. That's why Smitty's going to be doing a lot of wide receiver content in 2022. So buckle up and get ready for that. You're probably wondering where Elliott is. You're probably wondering where Montgomery is. Hey, Smitty, where the heck is Javonte Williams? You love Javonte. Well, if Javonte gets into the lineup, let's say he starts week 13 on and tears it up, he could climb into the number 6 spot. But for now, we got to roll with what we actually have right in front of us. Clyde, how does Clyde finish the year? Does he get massive volume? He scored a touchdown, looked pretty utilized in the game today, but there was a sharing situation still going on. Aaron Jones signed a big deal, but does that mean he's going to last as an every down back going forward? Is AJ Dillon the future? What happens if A-Rod does in fact, and he probably will, leave Green Bay? Touchdowns go down for Aaron Jones, guaranteed. And he has never survived as an elite running back without the touchdown volume, without the surplus of touchdowns provided by Aaron Rodgers. What about Cordarrelle, Smitty? Where's Cordarrelle Patterson? I mean, you could argue him in the top 10. I'm not putting him in the top 10. I'm not putting James Robinson in my top 10, but I could understand anybody wanting to. Look, it's a very tough thing to rank that 6 to 12 or 6 to 15 range of players. And I'd love to see somebody else do it and get a more consensus agreement with people watching said ranking show. As Grandpa said, you can please all the people some of the time, some of the people all of the time, but you cannot please
All of the people all of the time.
the nature of fantasy football content creation. Joe Mixon, some of you are going to say, where's Joe? And I get it. Darrell Henderson, as I said, Zeke Elliott. Don't get me started on Cam Akers. We have never seen a running back return to an elite level coming off an Achilles tear, and you've got Darrell Henderson and a big mess going on there. I'm not putting Akers in my top 10. But I would love to know who you believe I left out, or who you agree with, who you think I should have ranked higher that you still like on my rankings. Go ahead and drop it below. Get your text advice at heysmitty.com. I carry around my personal phone and I carry around my text line. And on my text line, I get text messages all day long from people like you. And I'm live on Instagram out getting food like I normally do. Miss Smitty, hold on a second. Yeah, Billy, I would probably start Terry McLaurin. Do it. Order the text advice and text with me on demand, baby. Go to heysmitty.com and order your lifetime membership at sleeperu.com. Anybody that orders a lifetime membership gets a free 2022 draft call, and I'll give you text advice for the remainder of the 2021 season. Never pay for rankings again. Never pay for fantasy football articles. Never pay for fantasy football trade calculators. I invented the first instant-based trade calculator in 2003 in the fantasy football space. You can do multiple player trades. It's based on auction dollar values. My trade calculator will support a 3-for-1 trade, a 4-for-1 trade, a 4-for-2 trade, because it's based off auction dollar values. You ask it, should I trade a $65 JT for a $40 wide receiver and a $15 running back? And it says,
Nope.
so get your trade calculator action on. All of it at sleeperu.com, and order that lifetime membership and get that draft call. I want to draft with you in 2022 on the phone or text, whatever you want. I'm here for you.
Now get out of here, you filthy animals.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Top 5 running back. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. I'm Smitty.